Welcome to robofield.com. I'm your host Philipip English, and we're here today with analyst and co-founder of the Robo Global and editor-publisher of the Robot Report, Frank Tobe. The Robot Report gathers and reports industry news tracking the business of robotics, and Robo Global has developed an index of robot industry stocks. After selling his business and retiring from 25 years as a provider of computer direct marketing and consulting to the Democratic National Committee, major presidential and other campaigns and initiatives, he has energetically pursued a new career in researching and investing in robotics. In 2013, he co-founded RoboStock LLC, which was renamed in 2015 to Robo Global, and developed a tracking index for the robotics industry, the Robo Global Robotics and Automation Index. Hi Frank, many thanks for your time today and joining us. It's very much appreciated. So we're just going to run you through a whole host of questions just to learn a little bit more about yourself and the Robot Reporter, or the Robot Report, I should say. So could you introduce yourself and tell me a little bit about your background?
Well, I am Frank Tobe. I'm the editor-publisher of the Robot Report. It's a news portal focusing on tracking the business side of robotics. It's less interested in the inventions and the technology coming out of the schools, and more about the business of manufacturing, producing, using robots in the real world. I come to robotics from the data processing and data mining business.
Okay.
I ran a large business for many, many years during the transition time of the digital era. I saw the changes. I was affected by the changes.
I see.
I had a computer room that cost $250,000.
Wow, okay.
That gives you an idea. I went from washing machine-sized disks to little things you pick up in your hand that have 100 times, 1,000 times more space and computing power. And that disruption changed the nature of the business. And I liked participating in that change. So then I sold and retired and started to look for the next disruptive activity. And I think we're in it right now, which is the robotics industry in general, the transitioning of jobs, and but it's affecting everything, not just jobs. Think of self-driving cars. I just did an article this morning, I haven't posted it yet, of the 14 industry groups that will be seriously disrupted as self-driving cars get deployed worldwide. I mean, it's easy to remember for me back to the time when the digital era started and secretaries went out and airline reservationists went out and people started doing their own typing, their own data entry. Now we buy a good majority of our stuff online, and the nature of stores, commercial activity is all changing. And this is what's happening in robotics today. So that's how I got involved. Actually, I got involved because I asked my brokers to give me a basket of stocks that I could invest in.
Okay.
And they didn't know any. They knew a couple. And they didn't really understand that it's an international, global business, and that a good portion of the manufacturers and companies involved in robotics are not American.
Right. Yeah. This is the other thing. I mean, I've read something about like Bill Gates was saying that this is the start of the industry of back when he first started. That robotics are pretty much where they are now back when where he first started. So he's, so as you were saying, it's the start of like a new industry, and you're starting to see the next steps and things start to grow to sort of change the world, really. So I totally understand when you're coming from. I mean, like, what do you think of time frames? Because they always say it took, I say, like 40 years to develop the computer industry. Do you reckon it's going to be another 40 years to really hit a real peak or real fast speed for the robot industry, or do you think it's going to be smaller?
No, I think actually there are some very well produced roadmaps that plot out not only the time frame of how things will be deployed, but the time frame of how scientific challenges that still remain to be worked upon will be attacked, and how long it'll take for the magic to happen and the solutions come through, and then their deployment. Realistically, we don't even know how we're going to be affected.
Yep.
And in what areas, and which stakeholders will be the most affected. I can use the self-driving example because it's fresh in my mind, but if you think about the stakeholders in the self-driving industry, it immediately comes to mind insurance companies, car manufacturers, professional drivers. But think about some of the places that you don't think about. Car parts, garages and repair shops, parking garages, long distance travel, I'll rephrase it, short distance travel.
Yep.
Where if you're driving in a beautiful self-driving car and you've got screens and seats that recline, why do you need to stop at a motel along the route? Why do you need to go to the airport and take a 45-minute or an hour and a half flight from Munich to Berlin when you can just get in the back of this self-driving car and veg out?
Well, this is it. I mean, I totally agree with you. I mean, like, from my side, obviously I do like a bit of training in like robotics as well, and I try to read as many articles and reports as I can to see the future, but it's very hard to sort of pick the products that you think are the ones that are going to explode the industry. I mean, sometimes what I find is actually explaining to people or how you can take a product and use it in the industry. It's sort of changing people's ways. Like, they don't understand that they could take a mobile platform, for example, and put it here, and that way that you can take out certain parts of the business because this robot does it instead. But sometimes you just have to educate the people. But yeah, it's very, very hard from the products that I've seen to actually find to pick the ones that are actually going to be the ones that shoot off there and make the make the real changes. I mean, you said that you've got a new article with 14. Do you mean 14 like new manufacturers or 14 new cars that are coming out?
No, 14 industries.
Okay.
Stakeholder industries within the self-driving community that will be disrupted.
Right. Okay.
Some very major disruptions, and some. If you think about insurance companies, there'll be fewer drivers because there'll be fewer owned cars because there'll be fleets of hire cars.
Yep.
There'll be fleet discounts for insurance. There'll be, according to some studies, 90% less accidents. So the premiums won't need to be so high, which means the revenue streams won't be that high, which means the profits won't be that high. Big changes in insurance.
So is it?
And that's just one segment.
So for time frames, how long do you reckon it's going to take? Do you see the self-driving car coming in the next, let's say, 10 years before you see it as a real...
I've seen a variety of time frame layouts, and they all show that pretty much the major technologies will have kicked in by the low 2030s.
Okay.
And pretty much we will have gone from assisted driving, the steps of bringing, adaptive cruise control, lane control, automated braking, pedestrian recognition. That'll just move by the low 2030s into totally self-driving vehicles, at which time the major changes will kick in. Mm-hmm. Why own something when you can get a point-to-point fleet car when you want it for cheaper than it costs to own it?
Yeah.
And what are you going to do with your garage or the place where you used to park your car? That's new space. What are you going to do with it? I was at a financial conference, and I was surprised by the kinds of questions, but they're important to our discussion. When we were talking about the future of assistive robots that you can work alongside, that are easy to communicate with. One of the things that makes for the cheaper cost and the lighter weight is series elastic actuators, which are like tendon-like things in the arms.
Seen those, yep.
I say that, and the financial guy said, "Who makes them?" It's the first thing they say. Who makes them? Because they're looking for companies that are going to, little-known companies that provide important technology that's part of the industry that you might not know about. Speed reducers. Who ever heard of a speed reducer? Servos. That's something made in China. Why do you think about it? But all of these things relate to the production of robots in an economical way. So I think those are interesting questions to me.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, this is it. This is it. As you're saying, it's those smaller sensors that are being built, the smaller things that can be adapted to the bigger robots, to make them more easier to use and to make them cheaper to use as well. So, and obviously I know that I heard on one of your videos you were talking about the Baxter robot, and I believe that's got some tendon-like things where if you push into the robot, it will know there's a force there and it will stop. So it's a lot safer to use, like with humans. So I've seen some of the examples that you're talking about. I mean, like going back to that actually. So I remember from one of your talks you were saying like the Baxter robot and the Universal robot were two main players. I mean, are those still the two main players in your eyes, or have there been a few other robot companies that are producing these robots that work with people that you think are worth like keeping an eye on for?
Well, the nature of that marketplace is changing because a couple of the big companies have low-cost entries, and they have just been getting their act together. If you think about ABB, for instance, this is a major robotic provider of heavy-duty robots. For them to have a low-priced robotic arm is to have a real problem, volume selling. They have relied upon a network of distributors and integrators. Can these engineering companies handle this kind of volume? And there is big volume in collaborative robots, in assistive robots. I heard a talk by the guy who heads up robotics at BMW, which is, I think BMW is also Nissan. That I could be confused about that,
Okay.
but I think it is. And the two of them use 7,500 robots at the present time. They did a study with Universal Robots and found that they could put double, triple, even quadruple the number of robots to work on the remaining tasks in the automobile assembly process. And so long as they were cheap and they were flexible. They didn't require the fencing, the being fixed to the concrete, all that extra stuff.
All the safety around it, yeah.
But if you think that he's saying, he also said that they were planning, their tests were successful and that they were actually planning to acquire them.
Wow,
That,
okay.
to me, is, that's 15,000 to 30,000 robots that BMW is planning to acquire in the next short while. Big numbers, all of a sudden. And Universal is finding orders of that magnitude. The original idea was that these assistive robots would be for small and medium-sized businesses. Who knew that the larger automotive companies would want them also? And they're also finding that the large electronic manufacturers want them as well. If they can fit into a space on an assembly line, be narrow, lightweight, fit next to humans, and do, a plug-in intricate task, snap in, do these intricate tasks that haven't been able to have been done before, and pass the results to a human on either side. It's a wonderful thing. And thousands of these robots could be deployed.
Well, this is it, and you can understand for the bigger companies that they would obviously see that as if they can obviously put a robot into a place working with humans, then they can speed up the process. And obviously, if they make a faster process, that's how they can produce more and make more money. So it makes sense to them, to bring in that type of technology. I mean, so we've seen the robots that have that work alongside humans. But I've seen. What's your thoughts on the other types of robots that you get? So obviously, there's mobile platforms, there's drones, there's even types of robots that I've seen in warehouses that actually hang from the ceiling and dispense from the ceiling and pick up things from the ceiling. So is that growing as well? Have you seen a more demand from that side, or?
Well, warehousing is an interesting thing. As people want things faster, the nature of warehousing is changing. The big warehouses with floor to 4-story high ceilings of racks and these top-down things like you saw, grabbing and then putting onto very expensive conveyors, are being replaced. And Amazon is a perfect example of how they're being replaced. Amazon is making these very fast warehouses that are a single-story height with free-form shelving.
Yep.
Cheap plastic shelving. And they are using their Kiva-style robots to pick up that shelving and bring it to a picker-packer and then return it. And the result is that you can establish a warehouse in a very short amount of time because you don't need to build shelves. You don't need to build conveyors. You don't need to get the board's approval for super expensive capital investment. You don't need to do return on investment studies that plot out for multi years. These new high-speed warehouse deployments um, Kiva style goods to man systems are much cheaper. They're being invested in these days quickly. They're predicated on a very flexible mobile platform where you can put an arm on it, you can put a bin on it, you can put a cart on it, a shelf on it. It's one of those magic moments when this is a major change in warehousing, and it corresponds to the change in consumer buying online and the need for immediate delivery.
And this is it, and both these platforms are, as you were saying, the Baxter and the mobile platforms are around the warehousing. But we've also seen those sort of technologies like go into places like hospitals as well. So you get a robot like Kiva that would go around the hospital, like delivering drugs on time or delivering things to the patient's bed, so the doctor or nurse doesn't have to walk up and down the aisles with all these trolleys. It basically makes healthcare a lot more efficient. So so the warehouse robots are moving over to the medical side, and that, and as you were saying, we don't really know how they can literally mold into all different types of industries. So that's another area.
If you think about it as a platform, you start off with it being a tow. It can tow linen around a hospital. It could tow trays full of dinner dishes. Then if you think about it as a more advanced platform, you could put a lockbox on top of it and start delivering medication that only the nurse has a key. So that's a platform. It's a platform application, and using the same tow device. And then you can dispatch, depending on the navigation system, you can dispatch it from room to room, floor to floor, and pretty soon there's an industry there, and there is.
Yes.
There's one company leading the path called Athon, okay. and they're well known in hospitals and growing. And hospitals around the country, around the world actually, need this kind of thing because nurses are in short supply. And you don't want a nurse traveling down to the pharmacy to get the pills when you can get a robot to do it and schedule it when you want it.
This is it. Just making the whole thing a lot more efficient. So yeah. I mean, and I guess this is what your robot report is always about, really. Having a look at the new technologies that are coming out, how they're going into different industries. And that's why, obviously, I love that the articles that you write, because they're always relevant to things that to things that will happen in the future, but things that are going to happen in the industries now, and things are changing. So I know you started it back in 2008. Is that right?
Yes.
And so was it just so you started off with a few articles about robotics, and then you expanded out, and you started going to more and more shows and learning more?
Exactly. I put my 10,000 hours in. Okay. Trying to really learn the industry, and also at the same time compiling a database of all the relevant companies, and which ones of those are publicly traded and on the stock market, and which ones are not, or are likely to be sometime in the immediate future. If you think about Universal Robots, the collaborative robot, they're a very successful company. They got acquired instead of going public, but I tracked them with the hope that maybe someday I could invest in it, in its stock. As it is, I can't, but so I have this database, a good portion of which is free and available online for people to look at.
Sorry, Frank.
Go ahead.
Sorry, mate. I'll start that again. So what I was going to ask about your database, Frank, is that you have obviously you have a list of companies there. So if you own a robotics company or associated a robotics company, can they come to you and ask to be put on your database as well, and you would sort of put them on there, or does it have to be like specific types of companies?
Every company is vetted, investigated to make sure it is in the robotics industry. I do ask companies to send, if they find they're not already in the index, to send me information and I'll check it out. I'm surprised at how many companies I already have. There's over 4,500 companies.
That's quite a lot on there.
A very busy plot on a global map. But it's interesting. The stocks, which represent less than 10% of the overall number, that's a different story. That's a very valuable list. And in fact, some financial types have set up companies that have made an index with the information that I provided, and those indexes have turned into a mutual fund in Japan, a new one coming up in Taiwan, a couple of exchange-traded funds, one in Europe and one in America. So what they're showing is an interest in investors and financial types in the robotics industry. So, share the interest that you and I have.
So obviously, and this relates to obviously your Robo stock, which has been renamed to Robo Global, I believe now.
Sure.
And then from like a layman's term, so how many companies are in the Robo Global, and then if you can give us a brief explanation of how it works, sort of thing, and how you got into it.
The index has a little over 80 companies.
Okay.
They're split into two groups, what we call bellwether and up and coming. A bellwether is a company like iRobot, where their sole business is in robotics. And up and coming would be a company that maybe has a robotic arm or has an engineering department that is trying to take over a lot of automation tasks and developing things, but they're not really selling to a major scale yet. Or they're dabbling in drones or are unmanned vehicles, but they're not there yet.
Okay, so new things.
Or they are an ancillary business, such as the maker of series elastic actuators,
right?
Or servos, or or speed reducers.
And like, how did you pick these companies, Frank? Or is it was it a specific choice of you picking them, or is it a team of people who actually have a look into these companies and say, oh yeah, like that's the one? Or
Robo Global is made up of a few financial types and a few robotic advisors. As a co-founder, I'm still just an advisor. I provide them with the list of the companies that are out there that are truly robotic, or at least involved in the robotics sector. They then pick out those that have the most dollar volume, the most stability, there are a lot of fly-by-night stock scams, a couple of which I've tried to point out from time to time on the Robot Report. But mostly, we try to limit companies to those that have a high market value that have a daily trading volume that won't prohibit you from getting in and out when you feel like it, and that are reputable and have a strategic interest in robotics. And so there are 80 plus stocks that fit that category, and of which 25 or so are bellwether or true blue robotic stocks, and the rest are up and coming.
And is that list going to expand in the future then, or is it always going to sit around that 80 number?
I can imagine that it will expand, and I can also imagine that there might be subsets of it for those who want a more managed account. I'm a retired guy. I want a solid, conservative investment basket with as many stocks in there as I can, so that I grow with the industry.
Yeah.
And don't get killed when one stock throws things off dramatically.
Well, this is it, and obviously going back to your article, the robot report. Obviously, this is something that's growing with the industry as well. I mean, I was reading it a few years ago, and as your articles get more and more informative, I can see how it expands and more people know you. So not only are you doing it with your stocks, you're also doing it with like your web blog as well. So and it's very very useful for us in the industry to read what's happening. I mean, so moving on to the robot reporter. I mean, so what's the next year like? What's the next year like looking out towards? Is it you've got more shows to go to? You're doing some interviews at more shows, or is it have you got plans for 2016, 2017, or?
Well, 2016. My travel calendar is to Automatica, which is a big trade show in Munich, and also to speak at Robo Business, which is a pretty good robotic conference, non-scientific, business-oriented, in San Jose in the fall. A show like Robo Business that has tons of exhibitors is fodder for 20 articles of that are stimulated by seeing them in person, talking to the people, making contacts, and so on. A conference such as Robo Business is similar. Lots of speakers talking about the applications of robotics. In between that, I'm working on an agricultural project that will culminate in a research report coming out late summer probably, where I have used my list and database to contact and connect with all the players in agriculture that are developing robotic devices that could be useful or are useful, and what they're doing and what's their timetable for being able to sell them.
Yeah, see
so that's it for this year.
Yeah, so that's something I'd personally love to see, actually, because obviously like the architectural side of the robot industry is something that's very interesting, because again, there's not so many farmers and people wanting to work on farms, so the idea to have robots to do those types of work for you, is very very interesting. I think it's going to be a very fast growing industry as well. I mean, I saw some new products over at InnoRobo last year. That was a tool that went and killed weeds and certain sort of bad things in the crops. So yeah, I'll be looking forward to that report. So have you got a good collection of companies like or ready to put that report together, or?
Well, it's interesting. It's a series of numbers. There are about 140 companies around the world that are making something robotic for agriculture. Of them, I've surveyed them all and talked to all of them. Some of them just won't give me information.
Okay.
And some of them will. So I probably will have 70 or 80 companies that I'm going to profile. And of them, 15 will be really interesting, and the rest will be informative.
Okay.
Overall, you can pick up the flavor of what's happening. I think I can say the flavor is slowness and conservativeness, which is tradition in agricultural worlds. They move slow, and everything needs to be cost sensitive. Nevertheless, there's some really great stuff coming online.
Oh, brilliant! Right, brilliant, Frank. Thanks for that, Frank. So, just to give you, just to give us a quick overview of the Robo Report and your sort of future plans and an idea how people in the education world can obviously use the Robo Report.
Let me just say that the Robot Report offers not just information for people like you and me who are interested in the industry. It offers, through the global map, an opportunity for job seekers to look at the startups that are in their area and link over to their websites, give them a ring, look at what jobs they are offering. And with startups, they always need people. So it's a job seeker's resource. And as you tell people within the university or academia, please tell them about the global map and what a terrific resource it is for job seekers. It's also good just to know the businesses that are in the area, because if you are trying to establish a network of technologists to work with, it's good to know who's in your neighborhood.
Right, brilliant. Thanks, Frank. Thanks very much for your time. It's very much appreciated, and the overview of the Robo Report. I'll put in links below for all our guys can find you and keep up to date with you. So thanks very much, Frank.
Very good. Thanks for having me on your show.
That's it, guys, for our robot interview. I'm your host, Philipip English. And don't forget, guys, to visit my RoboPhil store if you want to find out where to get your hands on any of the robots in my videos. Now, if you like this robot video and want to see even more of the latest robot news, reviews and robot tutorials, then please hit the subscribe button to keep up to date with the latest videos that come out. Please have a look below as well, where I've put links relating to these videos as well as other information and web links for your review. If you have any questions or want to see any other robot interviews or reviews, then please write me a message in the comment section and I'll see what I can do. Thanks, guys, and looking forward to see you next time.